Okay, we're continuing with this quote book, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers, alphabetical order, Robert Mallet. He said, "It is not impossibilities which fill us with the deepest despair, but possibilities which we had failed to realize." Yeah, that's the stuff that bothers me. That I got injured and messed up my college wrestling career. That things didn't work out with my high school girlfriend who I wanted to marry. Okay, that I'll dwell on that. I can't help it. But things that are impossible, you don't think about them. Anyways, Maxwell Maltz. He lived from 1889 to 1975. He was a plastic surgeon who noticed dramatic differences in the outcomes of his patients depending on their attitude. People who were enthusiastic to hurry up and get well, to get home, take care of their kids or something, they would get well. People who were sort of like, seemed they didn't have a clear-cut purpose and were just sort of distracting themselves with the plastic surgery, for example, would have poor outcomes. And I've seen that, post-op, when I did a surgical internship, for example. The patients that are sitting there whining about pain, want more pain meds, they won't get out of bed and start moving, they don't do so well. The ones that, like I got a friend who's a surgeon. He had open heart surgery. He discharged himself on day one post-op and went home and said, "I can take care of myself. I don't want to be in this intensive care unit. I'll get a nosocomial pneumonia or something." My aunt, fractured her hip when she was in her 70s, and she's a real smart lady. She just went home day one post-op, signed out AMA. She's like, "I can take care of myself. I don't need all this hospital stuff. I can handle the pain." Anyways, okay, I liked his book called Psycho-Cybernetics. Back when I was in college, that was a very popular book with all the athletes. As an idea of becoming mentally stronger, fixating your purpose and getting all your energy focused on that. And it really does make a difference. A lot of the best athletes I know, and these guys were all Americans, national champions, even one of them was a world champion. They were all into Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics. Some of the University of Iowa wrestlers were as well. Okay, I found the books helpful, and I like the idea of asking the question, why not me? Why shouldn't I win the match? Why shouldn't I, be the one to get an A in the class, to get an A plus in the class, to be the best student in the class? So it gets you thinking about what you could possibly achieve, this idea of building up your self-image. Here's a Maxwell Maltz quote. "Our self-image, strongly held, essentially determines what we become. We simply must get it through our heads that holding a low opinion of ourselves is not a virtue but a vice. This is where you win the battle, in the playhouse of your mind." Yeah, that's another reason why, too. People say, "Oh, you shouldn't be arrogant." You know what? I'm like, you know what? I got to get myself psyched up to do big achievements. If I wasn't psyched up, then I wouldn't do it. I don't want to be a humble mope. I want to be an energetic achiever, okay? And you got to get yourself pumped up somehow. Like that, Harvey McKay quote, "If it is to be, it is up to me." How can I get myself into a mindset where I will have the energy to, work 12 hours straight on a project? It takes commitment. It's like I remember that, the movie was that Chariots of Fire, where he said, "Where does a man find the strength to run the race to the end? It comes from within." So you have to make sure that strength and energy is coming out of you. And the way it comes out of you is you have a clear-cut purpose. You've thought it out. Like biochemistry. I love biochemistry. I'd crush it. I'd get the best score in the United States. I was saying to myself, biochemistry is the language of God that He uses to write the book of life. And if I want to be a great scientist, great doctor someday, I must learn this. Okay? And I did think it was beautiful, God's creation. And what I'm trying to say is, people laugh at me, say, "Oh, why do you have to be philosophical about school?" And I'm like, why? Because that philosophic mindset is what gives you the energy to do all that extra work. And then that's what gets you good. It's not a coincidence that Bach and Michelangelo and, are religious fanatics, okay? Because it energizes you. And Isaac Newton, all right? All right, we'll continue with Maxwell Maltz quotes. "The self-image is the key to human personality and behavior. Change the self-image and you change the personality and the behavior. Successful people are able to rise above crises by relaxing no matter what the external situation. Their belief in themselves, the strength of their self-image is impenetrable armor which protects them against shattering events. To change what I would try to say is you're going to have ups and downs. You're going to get knocked down. You're going to have setbacks, disappointments, and failures. But if you got that clear-cut sense of destiny in your mind's eye that I was meant to do this and I'm going to do it. And if I get knocked down, I'm going to get back up and I'm going to try again. I don't care how many times I get knocked down. I'm going to do this. Then you're probably going to do it. But you got to get that mindset. Okay. He says, to change a habit, make a conscious decision, then act out the new behavior. It takes about 21 days of performing the new behavior before it becomes a habit. Okay, now here's one of my favorite quotes by Maxwell Maltz. You will act like the sort of person you believe yourself to be. If you think that you are smart, then you will work to prove you are smart. And I think that's really true. Like in children, you don't want them to lose their hope or to give up, because as long as they got that spirit of, I can do better, it's just a question of more effort, they're going to keep on improving. And I think you see that in some ethnic groups and families, is that if the family is very pro-education and strong on education, the kid just expects to do well. And they're going to push themselves. They're like, well, gee, my brother or my sister did well. I've got to do well. And it just becomes, an expression of being a member of their family or their ethnic group or whatever. They're expected to do well. Like, you see that in a lot of Asian kids. Their parents just expect them to get a good grade, so they expect themselves to get a good grade. And you see that with a coach. Like, I see high school coaches, every year they got a good team. They don't really have that good athletes. They just train them well and get them into the right mindset, You see that in college. A guy goes to Iowa for wrestling. He just gets better, He goes to Podunk, he's got nobody to train with, and he often doesn't do as well. There's exceptions, but... Okay, Maxwell Maltz continues. Imagination sets the goal picture, which our automatic mechanism works on. We have an automatic success mechanism programmed into our subconscious. We act or fail to act not because of will, as is so commonly believed, but because of imagination. Self-improvement is the name of the game. Your primary objective is to strengthen yourself. That's also what he's talking about, imagination and goal setting, is why you want to be around the best people in your field. Because if you're around them, it'll just be normal to be thinking about the highest level of achievement and quality and performance and stuff. Sort of like when I was a wrestler at Stanford, I was just thinking about wrestling as a hobby. I was grateful I had a scholarship. I was doing okay, above 500 record, varsity starter my first year. But then when I started hanging around Mark Schultz, I was like, wow, why are my goals so low? I should, aim higher. And that was really helpful to me. I did a lot better when I started spending time around him. Okay, Maxwell Maltz continues. Close scrutiny will show that most crises situations are opportunities to either advance or to stay where you are. Once you give your brain a goal to achieve, you can depend upon its automatic guidance system to take you to that goal. My dear child, you can't be held responsible for someone else's actions. Okay, so he's got videos on YouTube. He's worth watching. He gets you into a good mindset. Okay, next person is David Mamet. He's a playwright, born in 1947, an American guy. So is Maxwell Maltz. Okay, he says, old age and treachery will always beat out youth and exuberance. Not always, but it does give him a big advantage. If the leftist dismantling of the West is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. Yeah, he's a playwright. He cares about culture, and the West is where it's at. We all die in the end, but there's no reason to die in the middle. People may or may not say what they mean, but they always say something designed to get what they want. Characters on stage, like people in what we would refer to as real life, they do not speak to reveal themselves. They speak to get whatever it is that they want. That's the only reason they speak. Okay, and this next quote from David Mamet, he says, all rhetorical questions are accusations. Here's what happens in a play. You get involved in a situation where something is unbalanced. If there's nothing unbalanced, then there's no reason to have a play. If Hamlet comes home from school and his dad's not dead and just asks him, did you have a nice day today in school? That's boring. But if something is unbalanced, it must be returned to order. The subject of drama is the lie, and the end of drama is the truth, which has been overlooked, disregarded, scorned, denied, and the truth prevails. That's how we know the drama is done. The purpose of literature is to delight. I like that quote. Yeah, have fun. I sort of think of good writing as infotainment, information and entertainment. And he's sort of emphasizing the entertainment here too. But, if you're writing, perhaps because he's writing fiction, but if you're writing nonfiction, you want information as well. Okay, David Mamet continues on how to be a playwright. He says, the main question in drama, the way I was taught, is always what does the protagonist want? That's what drama is. It comes down to that. It's not about theme. It's not about ideas. It's not about setting. It's about what the protagonist wants. Forget narrative, backstory, characterization, exposition, and all that. Just make the audience want to know what happens next. A novel is different. It's kind of exhilarating not to have to cut to the bone constantly. Oh well, I can go over here for a while, I can say what I think the guy was thinking, or what the day looked like, or what the bird was doing. If you do that as a playwright, you're dead. The true writer must write not the acceptable, but the true. The definition of ambivalence is watching your mother-in-law drive over a cliff in your new Cadillac. Okay, David Mamet continues, having spent too many years in show business, the one thing I see that succeeds is persistence. It's the person who just ain't gonna go home. I decided early on that I wasn't going to go home, that this is what I'll be doing until they put me in jail or in a coffin. And I've also seen that, intensity of purpose is probably, I think, a little bit better of a descriptive phrase. Because I've seen that in guys who were wrestlers who really didn't have much talent, but you couldn't get them to go home after practice. They wanted to keep on working on more technique, more technique. They wrestled in every single competition in the spring off season, and they got good fast. I was impressed by that. And I've also seen that in other types of performers who they have this sense of destiny. This is what God wills me to do. And they tend to keep rising from one challenge to the next and do well. William Manchester, the historian, lived from 1922 to 2004, American historian, biographer. He wrote biographies of Douglas MacArthur and Winston Churchill. So here he is talking about Douglas MacArthur. General Douglas MacArthur's 22 medals, with 13 of them for heroism, probably exceeded those of any other figure in American history. He seemed to seek death on battlefields. MacArthur never went to church, but he read the Bible every day, and he regarded himself as one of the world's two great defenders of Christendom. The other was the Pope. Okay, Manchester continues, a man's task is to find himself, and if he fails in this, then it doesn't much matter what else he finds. Yeah, if you don't figure out what you should be doing, then, how are you going to get good at it? You got to like something to be really good at anything challenging. I ask myself of each sentence I write, is it clear? Is it true? Does it feel good? And if it's not, then I rewrite it. Okay, I think we're going to call it a day right there. Hope you found that interesting.